saying what it is actually would give stuff away, so I'm not gonna do it. I am literally waiting for it. I am waiting for it to arrive in the mail. I had to know, and I had to know, and I had to know. Like $7,500 worth of damage, which in 1986, somebody can figure out inflation for me. Like shoulders up tension. I feel like I'm doing it just talking about it. I don't know what word I was gonna say where I was just making a weird face. Oh God, math. Hi everybody, it's Audrey and welcome back to Chapter and Converse, and welcome to part one of what I read in June. So we're gonna do another first 5 books that I read of the month. I am filming this still in June, so TBD how many books I actually finish reading this month. But I'm having another good reading month. I'm very much enjoying myself. We are in the home stretch of Booktrovert Bingo at the time of me filming this. I have 1 square left to fill. I am honestly feeling very proud of myself. Let me shimmy. Take a look at where I'm at as of today. So I still need to read my dark academia book. I am more than halfway through The It Girl by Ruth Ware. I am loving it. And I'm very excited about the books that I read for this. So as always, I continue to mood read. It's just, I can't not mood read. But I definitely just sort of like let it roll for probably like the first month or so, first 6 weeks. I just read whatever I felt like. I plugged it in wherever it fit on the board. And then as we got into, I would say, the last month, I was a bit more strategic with my choices. So even though mood reader, you guys hopefully, maybe, possibly saw a lot of the book recommendation videos that I did. I pulled so many books, so much selection. So I definitely had a lot of choices within each of my categories, but it was great to get me to pick up some books that I've had for a while, read some authors I haven't read maybe, books that I have been letting collect dust on my shelf for a while. So as always, it was just such a fun time. So thank you again to everybody who participated in it and for just supporting it and having fun with it and posting about it. And just, I'm glad it helped. I know some people had said like it helped them read some books, kind of same thing as me, that maybe they wouldn't have picked up, or kind of help shift their focus for reading their shelves and kind of shop your own shelves, which is the whole point of it. And it was just great fun. So I will post a final one when I'm done, but I just really had a good time with it. So on that note, let's talk about the 5 books I read this month, a lot of which you just saw on there. The first book I read is The Night in Question, and this is by Kathleen Glasgow and Liz Lawson. So I was lucky enough to get an e-arc of this book, and I loved it. I have ordered the hardcover of it. I am literally waiting for it. I am waiting for it to arrive in the mail as we speak. So I'm very excited to have it, but this is the second book in the Agatha series. This is a YA mystery. It's smart, it's funny, it's clever. It definitely, for me, was in the vein of Truly Devious and the Inheritance Game series, or the Charlotte Holmes series, or what's the other one that I'm missing? I would say not as dark as Good Girl's Guide to Murder, but definitely a little bit of an edge to it. So I found this to be all of those things, with Veronica Mars meets TV Nancy Drew meets Jessica Fletcher and Murder, She Wrote meets Agatha Christie, of course, because it's the Agathas, with a great female friendship of besties, of kind of like a Finley Vero type best friend relationship with Alice and Iris. So the first book, which is what I predominantly want to talk about because it is a series and I don't want to give anything away. So in book number 1, Iris winds up being assigned to be Alice's tutor. They are juniors in high school. Alice used to be a part of the popular crowd, the cool clique, the in crowd. Some stuff has happened before the book began where she's kind of on the outs with that group. And Iris is from a different social circle at school. They're not friends, even though it's this small town in California. And the two of them wind up working together on this project. And then one of the super popular girls, who is Alice's former best friend, winds up going missing after a party one night. So there is a huge reward, which Iris could use. And Alice is feeling very connected to what happened because this is her former best friend and she wants to know what happened. So the two of them start to work together to solve the mystery. And I loved everything about it. So all the things I just said, I thought it was just really fun, really smart. It was such a compulsive read. I love these two characters. So Alice is the one who is completely obsessed with Agatha Christie. And she is using her Agatha Christie knowledge from her books to help solve the crime. So we get quotes from Agatha Christie. You don't need to be like knee deep into Agatha Christie's catalog of books to like understand this book in any way. But if you are a big Agatha Christie fan, I think you will appreciate a lot of the winks and the nods and the comments and the quotes and all of that is part of it. And then in book number 2, we pick up 4 months after book number 1 ended. And we have a cold case in the past, which is mentioned in book number 1. So Alice is obsessed with this murder in the past where a young starlet was found dead at Levy Castle back in 1929, I want to say it was. And then in present day, poor Alice also finds one of her classmates face down with a bunch of blood. So we have a past and present mystery. So I very much enjoyed it, like I said. So great circle of like surrounding characters, great friend groups. We get some family dynamics. There's definitely some darker, weightier subject matter to this. We really get that great friendship between the two of them, which I very much enjoyed. And I just had like an absolutely amazing time with it. So I did reread the Agathas, physically read it the first time, listened to the audio the second time. I talked about that in my previous wrap up. And then this book I physically read. And I just thought it was great fun. So if you're looking for a smart YA mystery with just some great characters and just like want to have a good time, this is absolutely the book for you. And then a complete 180 from the night in question. The second book I read is All the Sinners Bleed by S.A. Cosby. So this was an audiobook. I had an audio arc of it, which was phenomenal. I don't know what word I was going to say where I was just making a weird face. It was phenomenal. So the audiobook narrator is Adam Lazarre-White. He has done all of S.A. Cosby's books. So I listened to Razorblade Tears last year and absolutely loved it. I cannot scream loud enough about the talent of this audiobook narration and bringing these characters to life. On top of, I cannot scream loud enough about the amazing writing, turns of phrases, storytelling, just lyrical, beautiful writing in a highly impactful, just very dark story. It was so good. I binged this in a weekend. This was a book that I could not stop listening to. I could not get away from it. I just needed to know what was going to happen. And it's very weighty and it's very heavy, but it's absolutely phenomenal. So I feel like if you've read anything by S.A. Cosby, this will come as no surprise to you guys. So what I will say is Razorblade Tears, which is the only book of his I have read to date. I do have Blacktop Wasteland, it's out of view. But it is, Razorblade Tears was very, very violent, very fast-paced, very dark, and very violent. And this book is very different. A lot of varies. So there are some elements of violence to this book, but a lot of it is aftermath. So in this book, we are following Sheriff Titus Crown. He has been the sheriff in this town for a year. So this is his hometown. He left. He had worked for the FBI for a while and he wound up having to return home. And this town is not totally jazzed that he is the sheriff. So Titus is the first black sheriff in this town. And this is a town where things have been relatively quiet. There's not a lot of murders. There's not a lot of issues. And it is the 1-year anniversary of Titus being elected to sheriff. And when the book opens, there is a shooting at the school. A beloved history teacher is killed. And then the police officers who respond to the scene wind up killing the shooter. And this ripples through the entire town, as one could imagine. And the investigation into what happened that day leads to some very dark discoveries, including a serial killer. So we get a lot of really heavy, weighty, difficult subject matter. But like I said, we don't see the violence on page the way that we did in Razorblade Tears. So if that was something that didn't appeal to you or didn't work for you, we do see some descriptive aftermath, but to me it was not nearly as in my face and jarring as it was in Razorblade Tears. It served the story in Razorblade Tears, and I feel like this serves the story here. But we get like so many different dynamics to this. So we have Titus and the town, which as the stories about the serial killer, about the shooting that happened at the school, like this town is ready to implode. There are so many different things that are going on at the same time here. in a way that makes sense and it all works for the story. So I don't say that in a way of like there's too much going on. There's so many factors at play in this town that it is literally just like a ticking time bomb. And we see great relationship dynamics. We see great family dynamics. I feel like as much as I feel like we got to know the characters in Razorblade Tears, which really takes place over the course of a couple of days, I feel like this book definitely takes place over a longer period of time. And I feel like we really have an opportunity to get to know Titus really, really well. And I loved him as a character. I think his story is so interesting. I think the slow breadcrumb unraveling and revealing of his past. I think the complications of his relationships with others. And I just thought it was so well done. It is something that like I was on edge the entire time I was listening to this book, just like waiting for something, it's like you could just feel the tension and the pressure of this book. And again, S.A. Cosby is such an immaculate writer. Like the way he turns phrases and uses such beautiful language to describe really difficult things, but he is just such a lyrical, gifted writer. There is just so much about this book that I just absolutely loved, and so many characters. And I just again, like edge of my seat, not in an action movie, like heart pumping out of my chest. Oh my God. There's like car chases and all sorts of crazy things. But I feel like he did such an incredible job of creating sort of this claustrophobic, like shoulders up tension. I feel like I'm doing it just talking about it. And I had to know, and I had to know, and I had to know. And there's some dark discoveries. It is definitely one of these, you don't know your neighbors, you don't know anyone. And there's a line, to paraphrase from the book, where like, you know, they're talking about the serial killer and they're talking about these terrible things. And somebody is like, I can't believe we know someone who did this, you know, thinking it's somebody in their town. And Titus is like, you know, the thing is like, we didn't know them at all. Like, we don't know this person. We know them, but we don't really know them. And sort of that deep fear about like, you don't know your neighbor. You don't know anything about anyone. You don't know what's going on behind people's eyes. And it's just like that kind of dark, sinister nature. It's so good, you guys. It's so good. So if you have loved his past work, I feel like this is a no-brainer for you. I feel like if you were apprehensive about, again, I can really only speak to Razorblade Tears, there is still undoubtedly darkness in this book, but that very on the page, in your face violence is not in this book. But it definitely is disturbing in a lot of ways. So, but like so worth it, so worth it. I loved it. I absolutely loved it. I'm so grateful. Let me get this right. Oh my goodness. To Macmillan Audio for the audiobook arc of this. It was so good. I feel so lucky that I had a chance to listen to it before it came out. I also did like a full review on my Instagram if you want to see some other thoughts of mine, but just absolutely fantastic. Just hands down fantastic. The next book I listened to is The Bad Guys Won by Jeff Pearlman. So that is in a very abbreviated title. This is like a 30-word title. This is about the 1986 Mets. And there's a quote at the end of the book, which is they're interviewing the manager of the New York Mets, Davey Johnson, after the Mets won the World Series in '86. And it was like, you know, one of the reporters had asked him, you know, like how people are going to feel that the Mets won. And he says something to the effect of like, so many people are going to be happy, but so many people are going to be mad that the bad guys won. Because they were playing the Red Sox. I think so many people didn't think the Mets would pull this off. I think a lot of people were rooting for the Red Sox for so many years. We're still knee deep in the curse of the Bambino at this point. But I told you guys, so I talked about this book. I'm trying to think which video it was. Doesn't quite matter. I talked about how this was a contender for me. I don't know if I was just talking about nonfiction books, but anyway, I grew up a Mets fan and I was young during the 1986 World Series. I definitely was naive to all the things that were going on. Like even if I knew about it, I don't think I would have understood a lot of it. But this was a group of players who sort of a lightning in a bottle moment came together for this year. And I knew that there were hijinks that ensued. Again, I didn't quite understand everything that was going on, But this was a group of players. So A, 1986 was a totally different time in sports and the world and all the things. And B, I don't even know if that's going to make sense. These were people who were on top of the world. They were on top of New York. They were having the time of their life. They were having the best season. They just were the toast of the town. They got, you know, free meals at restaurants and people were buying them drinks everywhere. They were celebrities. They were on the cover of magazines. Like, they were it. And man, did they have a good time of it. So this book was interesting in the sense that it was really fun to replay that season as they catapulted further and further ahead into first place. These games that were like so down to the wire, you know, just so many things that maybe they shouldn't have won, or these clutch hits, or these things that were happening, and to relive that World Series game by game, and to relive the NLCS against the Astros just game by game, how they won, how they pulled it out, the struggles, everything that was going on behind the scenes, the chitter chatter with the players. But what I didn't love about this book, and I debated DNFing it early on in the book. So the book opens with a story about how after they beat the Astros, they got on a plane back to New York and basically partied so hard that they destroyed the plane, like $7,500 worth of damage, which in 1986, somebody can figure out inflation for me. But they were drinking, they were having a food fight, people were getting sick on the plane. Some of the players' wives were on the plane with them. Like, basically it was like Animal House frat party in the air times 10, like just absolute insanity. And I was just like, I don't need to know this. Like, I don't need to know this about the team. I should just keep my rose-colored glasses on and just remember them the way I remember them. But I stuck with it because it started to get like into the season. And some of it was very interesting behind the scenes, how players were traded, how moves were made, just decisions that were made. And there's a lot of quotes from the players, which are like pulled from all different places. And like, I get it. I'm not a delicate flower. I can handle 4-letter words all day long. But some of it was just felt like extra crass to me, that it just felt unnecessary. And again, I'm not naive enough to think that like people don't talk this way. But I feel like listening to this, like it was child Audrey listening to this. And I was like, I don't want to hear this. So there were parts of it like I just didn't care for. And it's fine that that's the game and that's the behind the scenes, but some of it just wasn't, I didn't need to know. I didn't need to hear it all. And there was a 4-part special on ESPN, I want to say last year it came out for the 35th anniversary of them winning. Oh God, math. Or maybe it came out in 2021. I don't know. I'll figure it out. But it had all the players like today, and some of them I was just like, oh man, if I never saw you again, I would have been fine. But a lot of it was just, it was fun and it was interesting. A lot of it was just like dark and dirty. There were a lot of things going on behind the scenes between addiction and gambling. They were arrested for like a bar fight that wasn't even really a bar fight. Just the endless partying, which again, like I'm not ignorant now, but as a child I totally was. So there were parts of it where I was like, I just didn't need to know this, but holistically I enjoyed it. I did enjoy some of the behind the scenes stuff, and it was also kind of sad at the end because they made big trades and made big changes, and this was like a team that like could have been a dynasty, should have been a dynasty, but decisions were made by the powers that be about some players, and they won this World Series and they broke up the team after that, and people just got into dark addictions. And it's sad to think that like no one was watching out for each other, or just how people sold each other out. So there were parts of it where I was like, this is really like, you don't know, you have no concept of what's going on like in a clubhouse or behind closed doors. But I'm glad I read it from an interesting, slightly nostalgic fact, even if some of it I could have done without. But anyway, Jeff Pearlman read the audiobook himself, so that was enjoyable. I always enjoy when the nonfiction author reads his or her own book, and it just made me grateful for the fact that I did live with rose-colored glasses as a kid. So anyway, I read it. I needed it for bingo. I'm good. I don't need to read another sports book about another team that I love. I feel like I'm good. I'm good for a long time. The next book I read is another ARC that I got from St. Martin's, and this is The Girls of Summer. This is by Katie Bishop. So this was another heavy impactful, really well done, really interesting book. This is a debut novel, and again, with like beautiful language and lyrical phrases and great atmosphere that really just pulled me in. So this is a dual timeline book. We are on the Greek Isles, and then we are kind of in and around London. And I really enjoyed this book. So I knew a bit about it from what it says on the back, which I'll read for you guys. So the tagline on this is, "What if everything you remember is a lie?" So Rachel has been in love with Alistair for 15 years, even though she's now married to someone else. Even though she was a teenager when they met, even though he is 20 years older than she is. So when she was 17, her and her best friend went to the Greek Isles for summer. So they're from the UK, and they were going to backpack and island hop through the summer as kind of a last hurrah. And they wind up, when the book opens, they are on this small island, which is non-touristy, just quiet, beaches, beautiful, all the things. And Rachel just falls in love with it. And Rachel and her best friend Caroline have what I think is a very typical teenage relationship, where Rachel has always felt like she is in Caroline's shadow. She's a little bit more introverted. She's the friend. People are always interested in Caroline. Caroline is outgoing. She's dynamic. She just like, all the attention is always on her. And Rachel has always felt a bit insecure around her, a bit jealous of her. And when they get to this island, this man, Alistair, they're out at a bar one night, approaches Rachel, and suddenly the attention is on her, and she feels special, and she feels seen, and she feels a little bit powerful. And we wind up seeing this, as I said, in dual timelines. So 16 years later, Rachel is back on this island with her now husband, who is not Alistair. And when she's on the island, she sort of has a chance run-in from someone she knew from that summer. And all the memories of that summer come flooding back to her. So we see the past timeline through 17-year-old Rachel's eyes. And then in present tense, we are seeing her reflect back on that time as an adult. And it plays a lot into romanticizing our memories, into sort of not seeing things in a way that other people do. So I would say there are some echoes of My Dark Vanessa to this, in that we do have this man who's 20 years older than her, and they're in a relationship, and she's 17. So there is definite discomfort to this. There is definite hard, very difficult parts to read, and to see adult Rachel try and revisit this summer and not see it the way we as the reader might see it. It's painful at times. It's hard to read at times. And, well, I would say Rachel's story is not my story. So I will say that. Rachel's story is not my story. But I did find some real understanding and connection of what it's like to be in a relationship with someone who's really manipulative, what it's like to, whether consciously or unconsciously, not see what's right in front of your face, not see the writing on the wall, to choose to not see what the writing on the wall is, maybe to explain it away, maybe to make excuses for it. And I think the relationship that she has with Caroline as well, I really could understand that and could feel what that's like for being the Rachel in the friend group. And I think there's so many things that Katie Bishop does in this book that are so spot on, that are so on point. I think she draws the most gorgeous picture of what life on this Greek Isle is like. I mean, like, I was there, and you talk about, again, like feeling the warmth, feeling the sand beneath your feet, like smelling that saltwater air, just all of that. And Rachel winds up staying there. She's working at a bar. She's living in a house with a bunch of other girls. And for her, this is like her summer of freedom. This is the first time she's felt like an adult. She feels like she is in control of her life for the first time. And that real kind of tricky coming of age time of your life, I just really connected with a lot of different elements of this book. And I just thought it was really well done. It is heartbreaking. It is hard. It's just, like I said, it's uncomfortable at times, but it's just so well done. And, well, not a teenager. There were 2 summers I had the chance, someone I used to know. Her family had a house in Portugal and we were able to go there like on vacation a couple of times. And I have not been to Greece, but the descriptions of this book very much reminded me of that time in Portugal. And it was a small town and we would like go to the bars late at night, and just that dynamic of the tourists and the people who live there all season and the people who are working there. And it just felt very familiar and like I could see it and feel it and smell it and all of those things. So I would definitely say like proceed with caution if any of this sounds triggering to you, but I thought it was just really well done. And in the present day, you know, the dynamic between her and her husband and her best friend. And I feel like that real reckoning of your past and having to face your past and having to come to terms with things and maybe not being able to see things in a different light. You know, I mean, I think there's a lot of challenge to that. And I just thought it was really well done. Like I binged it really quickly and I really enjoyed it. So it's the kind of book, like I said, you want to go into it with a little bit of caution, but it's just really well done. And I very much enjoyed it. And I'm very interested to see what Katie Bishop does next. So really well done. And then the last book I read for this part of the month is The Decagon House Murders. And this is by Yukito Ayatsuji. And I did mostly physically reading this, and I did a smidge of audiobook with it. I read this over 2 days. This was another one of those books where I was like, must be in it at all times, must find out what happens, must know who, what, when, where, why, how, must know. So this is labeled as a Japanese cult classic mystery. So this was actually originally written in 1987, first published in 1987. And then I want to say it was translated into English for the first time in 2015. Yes, 2015. So I had heard about this a couple years ago and wound up buying it because it's a Agatha Christie and Then There Were None inspired book, which is one of my favorites. And I have had this kind of like waiting to read it when the mood struck. So when I was trying to figure out a found in translation book for Booktrovert Bingo, I had a whole bunch of them and I was like, let me just pick one from like an author I haven't read yet from that's not part of a series. Like, let me clean slate this. And like I said, I binged this book and I really enjoyed it. So this is about a group of students who are part of a mystery club. So they wind up deciding to spend a week on this island where 6 months ago, the house there, which is called Blue Mansion, burned down and 4 bodies were found inside. So there was a suspect in the murders who was never caught. And these students decide to spend a week on this island, and they stay at the kind of secondary house to the Blue Mansion, which is the Decagon House. So it is a 10-sided house that they're staying in. And it is only reachable by boat. You know, it's 1987. So this was written in 1980, or probably written in like 1986. Came out in 1987. So, I mean, like no cell phones, none of that modern technology, none of that stuff. But also out on this island, there's no communication. They're cut off. You know, they get dropped off on a boat and they're going to come back a week later to pick them up. My camera card was full. All right. So anyway, I was about to say something that I really enjoyed about this book, and then I realized I feel like that's going to give away, not a clue, but give away part of the book, which I don't want to give away. So go into it blind and just have fun with it. So one of the things I did enjoy about the book, which is not in any way linked to the plot, is that I found that some of the things the author in this book did are things that I have seen in books since then. So whether other people have read this and have been inspired by it, the way this author was inspired by Agatha Christie, or if it's just things that make their way like into the bookish zeitgeist of things, I'm not quite sure. But I very much enjoyed, kind of like when I read Rebecca finally, and then I was like, oh, okay, I see how like this book winked at that, or this book took this. So I feel like there's a lot of books that have winks and nods to this, or things that are done in this book, super duper cryptic. But saying what it is actually would give stuff away, so I'm not going to do it. But I also would say, if you are super familiar with And Then There Were None and books modeled on And Then There Were None, there is a solid chance you might figure stuff out. And even though I did not know all the things, there was something that I figured out, but I would say it did not diminish my reading of the story because I did not know everything that was going on. I feel like this is one of those books that's so hard to talk about. All of it to say, this is the kind of book you can binge no problem. I totally enjoyed it. I liked the dynamic between the friends on the island, and it should go without saying that it's a dark and messed up people doing dark and messed up things kind of a book. And I really enjoyed the clues. I enjoyed, you know, this is a mystery club group of students. So they all fancy themselves the best detectives, obviously, because it's what they love. And it was fun watching them be the detectives trying to figure stuff out. We also get like different maps of like, there's like the 10-sided house. We get the map of the island in here. And as like, here's the island. I'm not going to show you stuff from later in the book, but like as clues are found, we see them in here, whether it's a map that they have drawn or things that they're finding. So I really liked that element of it as well. And it was just super bingeable and fun. So I had a good time with it. I have read, since I've read this book, I have seen a couple reviews where some people didn't enjoy the ending. I loved it. Like, I was totally good with this book from start to finish. So I'm very excited that I finally read it. And I just feel like so many people do an and then there were none style of story, and not everybody can pull it off, but this book for me absolutely pulled it off. So definitely recommend it if you haven't already read it. It's a really good one. And like I said, I did a smidge of it on audiobook. Let me tell you the audiobook narrator. All of it always down below. But the audiobook narrator is PJ Ochlan. I feel like he did a good job with the audio. I will say, and this could just be a me thing, I think if I had tried to do the audiobook out of the gate, which actually didn't occur to me because I just planned to read it. And then once I got into it, I was like, oh, I've got to I want to go for a walk and I need to do some cleaning and stuff, but I want to keep reading this book. So I wound up finding the audio for my library. I might have been confused because we do meet all of the students right out of the gate. And then we have the people on the boat who are bringing them to shore. And we get some of the backstory of the 4 people who lived on the island when the Blue Mansion burnt down. So there's a lot of names, there's a lot of characters at the beginning. Reading it, I did not have a hard time keeping anything straight. Sometimes I feel like you can get character soup at the beginning of a book and it's a lot of people. I do think had I just listened to the audio, for me, that would have been a lot of people to try and keep straight. But having started, I probably went into the audiobook maybe at the 50% mark or so of this. So I had put a decent chunk in. This is not a long book, 284 pages. So maybe around page 150, I started the audiobook. So I was deep enough into it that I had no problem with it, but the audiobook was well done, if that makes any sense. I'm not discouraging you from the audiobook, but for me, I think I would have had a hard time with all the characters, but I loved it. So I had a really good time with that, which was fun and a great bingo choice. Great bingo choice. So on that note, those are the books. Those are the first five. Those are the first 5 books I read in the month of June. Wow, you guys, it's a lot happening here today. So let me know, how did you do with bingo? By the time you guys are seeing this, bingo will be over. It's still going while I'm filming it. But let me know how you guys did with bingo. Did you crush it? Did you find some new favorites? Did you read some stuff off your shelf? Just let me know, anything you want to let me know, as always. And thank you guys, as always, for being here, for watching. I super appreciate it. That's a very strange turn of phrase. I appreciate it so very much. So thank you guys very much for being here. I just said that. I will see you in another video. Take care until then. And thanks, guys. Bye.